Welcome to part one of the two-part systems and operations review for the Ranger 29 Command Bridge Luxury Edition. In part one, we'll cover various systems on the boat, including power, water, heating and cooling, the Blackwater waste system, and others. A number of the systems on the boat run on 12-volt power supplied by the batteries. The house and engine battery on-off switches are located behind the port side circular access panel, while the thruster battery switches are located in the mid-berth. There's also a parallel switch that will combine the house and engine batteries. It's there in case the engine battery is drained and you need power to start the engine. So normally this switch is always in the off position. As mentioned before, the thruster battery switches are located in the mid-berth. All of the battery voltages can be monitored on the analog DC voltmeter that's located in the mid-berth also. There are two automatic charging relays that are located in the port locker. An ACR combines battery banks during charging and isolates them when charging is stopped and after battery voltage has fallen. So for example, we're charging both the house and engine batteries, so that's combined when we're charging, and then they're isolated when we're not charging. So the idea behind an ACR is intended to keep a load from discharging other battery banks if one bank drops below a specified voltage, say due to a bad battery. If you look at the ACR itself, there's a small LED light that shows green when the batteries are combined and charging. Also located in the port locker are breakers for other electronics, as well as a large fuse that's protecting the house battery bank. There are two more of these large A&L type fuses for the bow and stern thruster, and those are located in the midship outboard of the thruster battery switches behind the cabinet door. The 29 has a combination inverter battery charger, so both functions are available in the same box. That's located in the starboard lazarette. The battery charger function is automatically activated and the control panel turned on whenever the boat is connected to shore power and the shore power breaker is on. Also, that same thing happens if the generator is running and the red inverter charger switch is on. So when it's charging, the status light on the control panel is green, and then the display will show what state of charge is happening for the battery. So bulk, which is the initial charging, absorption, or full. There are automotive blade type fuses for all of the various DC electrical components that are on board. These particular fuse blocks are located behind a hinged access panel in the head behind the mirror. Also, there's a laminated sheet with the locations of all the fuses. That's included in the ship's manual bag. Here's a view behind the mirror showing those fuse blocks, as well as a circuit breaker for the anchor windlass. For the circuit breaker, to test these types of circuit breakers, you press the red button and the arm should flip down as shown in the upper image on the right. And then to reset it, just reinsert the arm back up into the breaker. Some of the other fuse blocks on the boat are shown here. The ones that are on the left are located behind a wood hatch that's in the mid-berth, and then the block on the right is mounted under the dash in the bridge. The LE edition of the 29 is equipped with two air conditioning units, and in order to accommodate the additional power requirements, the 29 also has two 30-amp shore power connections. That way you can connect to two separate dock pedestal outlets. Shore power 1 is usually sufficient for most of your 120 volt requirements. Shore power 2 was primarily dedicated to operation of the AC units. The process for connecting to shore power begins by turning off all the breakers on the panel. We do this so as to not to have abrupt change in load when energizing the system. So after you do that, then you connect the shore power cable to the boat, then connect that to the dock pedestal, and then turn on the dock pedestal breaker. So after connecting to the dock pedestal, come into the cabin and check the ground fault sensing modules to make sure the power lights are green and no red fault lights are indicated. This module should be tested, by the way, before each trip. So you press the test button, and then when you do that, the green power LED light should go off, and the red fault LED should come on, and the circuit breaker should trigger to the off position. Then after the test, just push the breakers back into the on position. After determining that the ground fault sensing module reads OK, then we can go to the electrical panel. The power lights here should be green and not showing a red reverse polarity light. Then we can turn on the shore power breakers, and when we do that, we should see that the line voltage shown on the meter reads about 120 volts. Although we do have the two shore power connections, the AC units can be run with only the shore 1 input, and that is done by turning off the shore 2 breaker, sliding the guard up, and then turning on the parallel breaker. So if we do this, then we should make sure we monitor the load current to ensure that it doesn't exceed 30 amps. So we're away from the dock, but we still want 120 volt power. One thing we can do is to use our generator. The process for doing this is to verify that the seacock that supplies cooling water to the generator is open. We make sure that the oil and coolant levels in the generator are good. Then we turn off all the breakers on the electrical panel for the same reason as we did for connecting shore power. Then we turn off the shore power breaker, move the guard slide up, and turn on the generator breaker. The generator uses the thruster battery for starting, so we turn on the stern thruster battery switch. Then we go to the generator control panel. We press and hold preheat for 10 to 15 seconds. Then press and hold the start switch until you hear the generator begin running solidly. The last step in starting the generator is to go back to the cockpit and look out over the port side of the boat and just verify that cooling water is exiting the side of the boat. Make sure that the seacock and the strainer are not clogged. Everything's good there. In the next few slides, we'll go over a few details regarding the generator equipment. The genset is located in the rear of the engine compartment. In this photo, Ivan is pointing out the location of the oil dipstick. In this slide, we see all the components of the generator with a focus on where to check the coolant and oil levels. Also, if the generator gets overloaded, it might trip the main breaker that's located on the right side of the unit, and if that happens, you just need to reset that. As mentioned before, the generator has its own dedicated seacock and cooling water intake line. In this image, we see the water filter sea strainer for the generator. It's pink because it's been winterized with antifreeze. The generator needs air for both combustion and for cooling. So in addition to the saltwater cooling lines, there's also this blower fan that provides cooling air for the generator. The air conditioning units can be run with the generator, and that's done by turning off the shore power 2 breaker, sliding the guard up, and then turning on the parallel breaker. So make sure that you monitor the load current so that it doesn't exceed 30 amps. If too much load is placed on the generator, it's possible that the breaker on the right side of the generator might trip, and as we saw in a previous slide, and will need to be reset. A couple of other items regarding the generator. On the starboard side of the engine compartment are the 2 fuel filters, as well as a fuel shutoff valve for the generator. And then there's a hand primer bulb that also can be used to prime the fuel lines if necessary. The R-29 comes with a combination inverter battery charger unit. We've already talked about the battery charger function. When using the inverter as an inverter, we are basically taking 12 volt power from the batteries and we're converting it to 120 volt AC alternating current power. The inverter is located in the starboard lazarette. As with the battery charger function, this on-off switch, this red switch that's located in the port lazarette, has to be on for the inverter to operate as an inverter. In order to use the inverter to generate 120 volt power, first we go to the electrical panel and turn off all the breakers, including shore power 1 and 2. We'll turn on the red inverter switch in the port locker. Then we'll go to the inverter control panel and we'll press the power button on the inverter display. at which point we should see the displays show the voltage for the batteries, as well as an orange light for status. And that means that we're using the inverter to take battery power and create 120 volt power with that. When we're using the inverter, there are several 120 volt functions available, all the AC outlets, the wine cooler, and the microwave. All the things that just run on DC itself, we don't need the inverter for. We just turn on the house battery switch to run items like the water pump and the lights, for example. In the next few slides, we just want to recap all of the different power options, and we're going to use this display panel to illustrate those. So when using shore power or the generator, the status light on the display panel is green. That indicates that the inverter function is being bypassed. That is, we're not drawing current from the batteries. And if the red switch in the port locker is on, then the battery charger is active and batteries are being charged. Alternately, when we're using the inverter to convert 12 volt battery power into 120 volt AC power, the status light will be orange. And in order for the inverter function to be working, the red switch in the port locker has to be on. So in this case, we're using battery powers, and the batteries are being discharged to create 120 volt power. One final item on the control panel. Sometimes when disconnecting shore power, you might hear beeps and see an E03 fault on this panel when turning off the shore power breaker. So if this happens, just press and hold the power button for a second to clear the fault. The 29 comes with a 175 watt solar panel. It's capable of producing 6 amps peak to peak. Should be keeping the panel clean and unshaded in order to get the best results. The controller for the solar panel is located in a compartment on the starboard side of the cockpit. The solar charge controller sends current to both the house battery and engine battery, with most of that current dedicated to the house battery. You know that it's on when the LED in the top left is solid green. But if it's a solid green, that means it's not producing current. So maybe it's a cloudy day or there's a shade that's covering the panel itself. If it's flashing green, then it is producing current. And you can scroll through the menu items and see how much current is being produced, the voltages at the solar panel, the voltages of the batteries, some other diagnostic items as well. When the engines are running, there's an alternator that supplies power to charge the batteries. A priority given to the engine battery first, and then the house and thruster batteries. The Volvo electronic vessel control system is protected by some circuit breakers and fuses that are located on the engine itself. So the EVC system, it connects and manages all the internal communications between the engine, the driveline, throttle levers, display screens. So this is the whole system from helm to prop. So there are these breakers and fuses that protect the system. And if it's one time you can't start the engine, it's possible that the problem is that one of these breakers may have tripped and needs to be reset. The freshwater system consists of a 45-gallon water tank and an 8-gallon water heater. The water level gauge is located in the galley. To turn on the pump and the gauge, then just click the rocker switch below the gauge. The pump for the freshwater system is located under the floor hatch in the galley. One of the maintenance items is to occasionally check the filter for debris. And so the filter can be detached from the pump. First turn off the pump first, and then open faucets to release pressure from the system. Then slide that blue latch to disconnect that filter housing from the pump itself. And once that's done, it's easily to unscrew the cap and then take out the filter screen and inspect it for any amounts of debris. The hot water heater is located under the footwell of the helm station. You can access it through a panel in the mid-berth. When the engine is running, the hot water heater uses hot coolant water that's circulating from the engine, and that heats the water in the water heater tank. When the engine is off, we can continue to heat the water using electricity from either shore power or the generator, and there is a breaker switch on the electrical panel to turn that on. The heater has a temperature control on it. That's the upper black knob that has the plus or minus marks. Heading towards plus increases the temperature. If you want to winterize and drain the hot water tank, then there's a gray knob. If you rotate it a little bit counterclockwise, it'll pop out and allow the water to drain out of the system. If you happen to turn the heater on with the water drained out of it, it's possible that the internal breaker might trip for the hot water heater, and that breaker is behind the gray hatch that's removed with the 4 screws. And then if you go to once you open that up, make sure you turn the power off before you do open up that hatch. There's a green element up on the upper left that has a small square red breaker that'll pop out, and you just have to push that back in. The cabin heater works by using hot coolant water from the engine, and there is a fan that distributes the warm air from that system, and that fan switch is located at the helm. The lines that connect the hot coolant water from the engine to the hot water heater and to the cabin heater have shut-off valves, so that if we suspect that there might be a leak in those systems, we can turn off the coolant flow to those systems and keep it inside the engine where it's needed the most. Cooling and heating can be supplied by these Webasto air conditioning units with reverse cycle heat. And there are 2 of these units on board, one of them forward in the master berth, and then one for the main cabin. These units run off 120 volt power, so we need to be on shore power or using the generator, and they use raw seawater for cooling. Cooling water for the air conditioning units comes from a through-hull and seawater strainer that's located on the starboard side of the engine compartment. The pump for the air conditioning units is located forward of the strainer. That's a 120 volt pump, so we need shore power or the generator running in order to operate. That through-hull and strainer also supplies water for the toilet pump and the washdown pump. The startup procedure for the Webasto air conditioning units is to make sure, first of all, that the seacock is open in the engine compartment. Then we turn on the AC relay breaker. That enables the saltwater pump to be turned on. And then we turn on the AC breaker for any of the units. Then we turn the unit on from the digital display panel that you see on the right there. This is a closer look at the display panel. So the power button, push it once to turn on the display, and then push it one more time in order to get it activated and start the pump. Then you can select what mode that you want to use, either heating or cooling or just the fan only, the dehumidifier setting. The first reading on the display panel will be the ambient temperature, and then you can set the temperature that you desire by using the up or down arrows. When turning the units off, you hit the power button to wake up the display, and then once more to power it off. Then it's recommended that you give them a minute or 2 in order for the fan to shut off and for the system to spit out that last little bit of water in them before you turn off any breakers associated with the AC units. The final step when using the AC system or AC overheat is to make sure that there's cooling water circulating through the system. And the easiest way to do that is take a look over to the side, starboard side of the boat, and make sure water is coming out of those exhaust ports. One of the maintenance items associated with the air conditioning units is a screen that needs to be checked and cleaned if needed. The 29 has an electric marine toilet. The control panel has 2 functions, add water and flush. On the holding tank itself, there are sensors that detect the level, and they're displayed on the control panel in that lower right indicator. It'll show green for empty, yellow for mid-level, and red for full. The toilet uses raw seawater, and that is supplied by a toilet pump that's located in the starboard lazarette. When the toilet is flushed, it goes into this 40-gallon holding tank. It's located under the floor of the forward cabin. And then when it gets near full, then it's pumped out via the waste cap that's located on the starboard gunnel. There is certain conditions where you can discharge the holding tank overboard via the macerator pump, but normally you're restricted on that, and in order to prevent you from doing that, the macerator shutoff valve is normally zip tied in the off position, and that is something that the Coast Guard will check if you happen to be stopped and inspected. But if you do need to or can use the macerator pump, then that zip tie should be cut. The valve should be turned to the open position, and then you can turn on the macerator pump. When using the macerator, the effluent will exit the boat on the starboard side. So you can open that shutoff valve we saw on the previous slide and start the pump using the head discharge switch that's located on the helm. Make sure you monitor the outflow and stop the pump when the flow ceases. Do not run the pump when the holding tank is empty, or the pump could be damaged. The shower for the R-29 has separate controls and a wall-mounted shower head. There is a curtain that runs around a track on the ceiling that keeps most of the head from getting wet. The shower will drain into a sump box that's located under a hatch in the floor just outside the head. Inside this box is a sump pump with a sensor that activates the pump when the water level rises in the box. The screen in the sump box should be inspected occasionally and cleaned if needed. There are two bilge pumps that are located in the engine compartment. These pumps will operate automatically using electronic float switches, even if the battery switch is in the off position. There are manual switches for the pump also on the helm console, and note that the pumps will run continuously if these switches are turned on. So if you do that, monitor the outflow so that you don't run the pumps dry. There is a high water alarm sensor that's located in the engine compartment, and it connects to an alarm at the helm console. So the alarm has a red light that illuminates when the sensor detects water, and if the switch is placed in the arm position, then it will also generate a loud audible signal as well. The stovetop and oven use propane that is supplied by two propane tanks that are located in a locker on the swim step. In the galley, there's a propane fume detector that has a solenoid valve control. To operate the system, you turn on the manual valve at the tank, then verify that the fume detector LED light is green, okay. And then you press and hold the button on the lower left, and that'll open the solenoid valve, and then the valve LED will turn green, and that allows propane to flow from the tanks to the stove. The 29 comes with a Force 10 stainless steel full 2-burner cooktop and oven. It has a tuck-away door. In addition to the oven function, it has a broiler. The unit has a thermocouple sensor that is a safety feature that turns off the gas if the flame is accidentally extinguished. This means that after igniting a burner, you need to keep pressing the control knob in for a few seconds until the thermocouple senses the heat. Otherwise, it'll just shut off the gas. There is a microwave that's located underneath the helm seat. It runs on 120 volt power, so it requires either the shore power, the generator, or the inverter to operate. The microwave has a breaker on the electrical panel that needs to be turned on in order for it to work. Located at the entry to the master suite is a wine cooler. That is also a 120 volt unit. Power to this wine cooler is controlled by the Galley outlet breaker on the electrical panel. The refrigerator in the galley is DC powered, runs off of the house battery bank. The unit can be turned off or on and the temperature adjusted using the control knob on the inside of the unit, 0 being off and 7 being the coldest. There is an option to have a refrigerator or freezer located in the cockpit. These are also DC powered and again run off the house battery bank. The controls in these units are similar to those that we described for the galley refrigerator. There is a washdown pump and attachment with the on-off switch located in the cockpit. That is supplied with water from the raw water pump and filter that is located in the rear of the engine compartment. There is a hot and cold freshwater shower that's located on the transom next to the swim platform. This is fresh water, so the freshwater pump switch inside has to be on for this to function. Another option that's available with the 29 is an inflatable dinghy with a Weaver bracket system. The dinghy is held in place on the swim step with two stainless steel standoff brackets that are attached to the transom. And then at the base there are two mounts on the swim step that secure to the lower side of the dinghy. Although the dinghy can be hand lifted into position once the lower brackets on the swim step are clipped in, there's also a winch that mounts to the cockpit roof that can make it easier to rotate the dinghy in position in order to attach the upper standoff poles.
Just gonna have tension on the line. And then to let it out, you go backwards here, just like a winch on the trailer. You can go from and back. Same idea, you gotta have tension on the line, and then you release it. Just going up and down on the handle.
The cockpit table is supported by two poles. Each of those legs has a small tab that fits into a slot on the mounting plate on the floor. Once you insert the pole into the mounting plate, turn it clockwise to tighten. And then with the two poles in position, place the table on top and push down to lock it in. The starboard cockpit window can be fully opened and the dinette seatback reversed for additional cockpit seating, as well as creating a nice open air environment. Well, that concludes part one of the training review. We hope you have fun on your next Ranger Tug adventure.